Good evening, everyone. Men, I have some bad news for you. You are obsolete. Your testosterone-fueled vim and vigor that has helped explore uncharted territories, construct towering skyscrapers, and build corporate empires is no longer needed in this post-industrial society that we live in. This is a woman's world, men. We're just living in it. At least that's the message we've been hearing a lot lately in the media. If you've been paying attention to the news magazines and the cable talk shows, you've been hearing a lot about the state of American masculinity and how men are struggling today, particularly young men. And inevitably, the authors of these magazine articles, or the people who are heading up these talk show segments, make the conclusion that we need to reinvent masculinity, that men are obsolete, that we don't need them anymore. We saw this in the summer in the Atlantic Monthly. They had a cover story called "The End of Men." Now, as a man, I'd like to think I'm useful to my family, to my community, and I want to stick around. I think you, all the men out here, feel the same way as well. So today what I'm going to talk about is the fact that, yes, men are struggling in America today and across all Western societies. Talk about how they're struggling, why it got us here to the state of men who are disengaging from society, lost ambition, and then what we can do about it, the solution. So how do we get here? Or first, what's the problem? One area is education. Young men and boys are falling behind their female peers in the area of education. More girls than men or boys graduate from high school. More boys are diagnosed with learning disabilities. In the area of post-secondary education, women are outpacing men substantially. Right now in America, men make up only 43% of college enrollment. The number has been declining steadily since the 1950s. And what's interesting too is that the men who do go to college, fewer are actually graduating. And education experts have said that this generation of young men between the ages of 20 and 40 are actually less educated than their fathers are, which is crazy. This is the first time this happened in our country where things have actually gotten worse. Where else men are struggling? We've probably heard about young people moving back in with their parents nowadays. These are the boomerang kids. But what's interesting is that men make up the lion's share of this demographic. Right now in America, 1 in 3 American men between the ages of 20 and 34 still live with mom and dad. And this could either be this guy's mom or wife. But for this purpose, we'll say it's their mom. And what's interesting when they do these surveys and they talk to parents and young men aren't in a hurry to leave. And parents are reporting that their sons are using the savings they get from living with them to, instead of paying down debt or save up for a mortgage, they're using it to subsidize a lifestyle of video games, hanging out with friends, and just extending adolescence. Employment with men. For the first time in our country's history, women outnumber men in the workforce. Now, our current recession has a big contributing factor to this. The sectors that have been hemorrhaging jobs, construction, manufacturing, farming, are traditionally held by men. And things are getting a little bit better, but labor experts are concerned about the future of men in the workforce. With fewer men going to college, with fewer men even taking up trade schools, they're afraid that men are going to be less qualified for the jobs of the future. And in the area of family life, men are putting off marriage later and later. The average age for the first-time marriage for a man is 27 years old. There's a lot of reasons for that. High debt load. Men feel they can't get a good job that can support a family or contribute meaningfully to a family. But what's interesting too, the statistic I found very interesting, is the number of men who are deciding to opt out of family life completely. In 1977, 6.3% of American men between the ages of 34 and 54 had never been married. That number today is 16.3%. So there's more and more men who are deciding to live a life of the eternal bachelor. So how do we get, why should you care? Why should you care about the state of American men? Because some of you out there, particularly women, might think, well, it's about time. Men had their comeuppance. It's our turn to rule the roost. It's just cosmic justice that we're thriving and men are failing after thousands of years of oppression. Well, here's why I think that's very jaded, but here's why you should care. These men who are struggling are your sons. They're your grandsons. They're your brothers. They're your potential husbands. So you should care about them and want them to succeed. But stepping back and looking at it from a community level, we need both genders to be thriving and succeeding. Sean mentioned that we have a lot of problems. in our culture, in our country, and it's true. And we need both genders, both sexes, to be bringing that, all their excitement and ambition to that. So how do we get here? Well, one factor is absent dads. 1 in 3 American children today live apart from their biological father. Now, being away from your dad impacts both girls and boys negatively, but it hits boys hardest. And without a strong, positive, masculine influence in the home, boys turn to their peers or the pop culture to find out what it means to be a man. And what that results in is violence, learning problems, emotional problems at home. And it's just interesting that the life skills that used to be taught naturally, passed down naturally from father to son, aren't being passed down anymore. Learning how to tie a tie. It's amazing on my website that I run, how many men in their 20s or 30s have never tied a tie and they have to go somewhere else to learn how to do that. And it's very basic, and you might think it's not very consequential, but it's more than just that. Just basic life skills aren't being passed on. For better or for worse, men have identified their masculine identity in their work. The problem is, though, the nature of work has changed dramatically in our country's short history. Before the Civil War, we were an agrarian society. 90% of men owned their own farm, owned their own shop. But after the Civil War, we became an industrial society. And that pride, that autonomy that men took pride in, they identified with their masculinity, their manhood, was taken away. They had to go work in the factory, work for another man. They became alienated from their work. And now today, we've shifted from an industrial economy to a service-based economy. And men are even feeling more detached from their work, like it's not meaningful. And also the work that's traditionally held by men, blue-collar jobs, trade jobs, is devalued. I mean, I don't know how many of you, when I was in high school, it was unspoken that you would go to trade school, because trade school was for the bad kids, the dropouts, the losers, which is a shame because we have this crumbling infrastructure in our country, but there are not enough people to fill those jobs who are skilled. So the devaluation of that traditional masculine work. Consumerism is another factor. Consumerism makes men passive, and that's not masculine, right? It makes men soft and weak. And in fact, our founding fathers warned about that, warned of excessive luxury and wealth because it will make you passive and weak. And we're seeing that with men, a generation of men who spend all day playing video games and surfing the web and not really contributing to our society. Finally, feminism. People will get all upset when I mention that. Personally, I think feminism did some good things for both men and women. But it'd be naive to think that feminism didn't have an effect on men. I think we take for granted the rapid change that happened in the 30 years since the women's movement. And I think it left a lot of men feeling lost and confused about what it means to be a man today. And finally, our obsession with youth culture. Youth is no longer a transitory period. It's the end goal. We want to stay young forever. And apparently, it seems like a lot of young men have taken to this, particularly men, have taken to this extended adolescence. And the perfect example is Hugh Hefner of Playboy. Man is, I think he's 80 years old, but he readily admits that he's trying to live out his teenage fantasies. And when that's kind of put out there as the idea of manliness or masculinity, I think we're setting a bad example for our young men. So what can we do about it? What's the solution? Well, one solution that you see in these magazines that you read about, the end of men, they always say that the solution is that we need to reinvent masculinity. And what that usually means is men need to act more like women. Here's the problem. We've been trying to do that for the past 30 years, trying to treat both genders as if they were the same. But we're not. Biologically, we're different, and we're learning more and more that our biology actually changes, affects the way how we think, our psychology. And I think we need to get past this whole gender war thing about which gender is better. I think we need to value the differences and celebrate the differences and see that men and women can bring different and important contributions to family life, to business, and to government. So we need to get past this whole thing that we need to be the same, right? Another trend I'm seeing that is a possible solution is these young men today, it's kind of a fad, or I hope it's not a fad, but it's a trend where they're putting on the trappings of manliness. They're shaving with straight razors. They're dressing like the guys on Mad Men, right? Which is fine. I think it's great if this world was a little bit more handsome and people took a little more formal. The problem is that's just plain dress up. Shaving with a straight razor isn't going to make you a mature man. Dressing up like Don Draper will not make you a good man. In fact, Don Draper is just an adulterous alcoholic who dresses well. Not something we should aspire to in good men. So what's my solution? And this is what I've been doing with my work on the website for the past 3 years. My solution is we need to simply revive the lost art of manliness. We don't need to reinvent masculinity. in America. We have a rich heritage of what it means to be a good man, going back thousands of years. My favorite definition of manliness, it comes from the ancient Romans. For them, manliness meant what came from the word virtus, all right? And that meant to be a virtuous man. And virtus in Latin meant manliness or masculine straight. In fact, our English word of virtue comes from virtus. And so for the Romans, being a manly man meant developing attributes of courage, of self-reliance, of industry, of hardihood, of nurturing friendships. What happened was in the past 30 years, we've thrown all that away in our changes that we've made in our society. We've thrown that away, threw the baby out with the bathwater and got rid of this. And manliness has become a joke. When I tell people I run a site called the Art of Manliness, they automatically chuckle. They think manliness means grilling meat, Chuck Norris doing a roundhouse kick to a shark in the face. It means shotgunning beers, which is very sad. It's become a cartoon. What I'm trying to do is bring back that, no, we have this very rich heritage and tradition of masculinity that we can use. Now, when people say that, when they hear that, they're, well, Brett, there's a lot of bad things about manliness from the past and that we should just leave there. And I think you're right. There's a lot of things that's wrapped up in masculinity in America that we should leave in the dustbin of history. Things like racism and sexism and homophobia. That stuff we should leave that behind, but we should take what's good from our past, what it means to be an honorable man, and create something new. Create this new man that combines both the best from the past and the best from now. Men are struggling today. We are. The stats show that. We don't need to reinvent masculinity. We simply need to revive this rich heritage of manliness that we have. Like I said at the beginning, we have a lot of problems in this country today and in this world. And we need actively engaged men, ambitious men who are ready to do good. So I hope, my goal is that you all will join me in helping these young men who are floundering, who are struggling, revive the lost art of manliness. Thank you.